I apologize to some of you for what is about to come out of my mouth. Before we begin, thank you very much to Rizful Ohioan Grimace Shake Sigma with a Gyat for joining the Patreon campaign. Why do you fill my mouth with Gen Z words? Why do you do this to me? You have any idea how cringe this is coming from me? Also, thank you very much for the support. But this is like, just a warning, like, this same person has a third shout out in a row coming. It's just as awkward. But they duck out of my campaign as soon as they pledge, so I can't message them and tell them, you don't need to donate the top amount to get a shout out. And you are, like, tripling up your donation. Please stop this. Please stop. Like, this is a little reckless. If you just want me to say silly things, it costs $1. Don't overdo it, please. I do appreciate the support, though. You've been very generous, so thank you very much for that. I just want you to be careful. I want you guys to take care of yourselves first, please. So let's get into today's topic. Let's get into the topic of the day. We are looking at Skywarp today, and we're looking at a particular thing that keeps happening with Skywarp, something that I keep bringing up in videos, but we've never really focused in on, so today is the day. We know that when one Seeker mold is produced, we are very likely going to get, at the very least, the core 3. It is extremely unusual when we do not. It has happened on occasion, but sometimes, only sometimes. We, for the most part, always expect when a Starscream is released, we're getting Skywarp and Thundercracker. Minimum, right? But a lot of the times, when we actually do get that trio, for some reason, most of the time, it's Skywarp who ends up being a little bit odd and a little bit off compared to his Seeker brethren. It's not a hard, fast rule. It is not 100% of the time. But it seems like when they're in the mood to make one of them a little bit different than the others, it's always Skywarp. So we're just going to take a look at the history of this, just so you see where I am coming from. And the first example is in Armada. Now, already, we acknowledge that Armada Starscream is different from Generation 1. We have foregone the traditional blue coloring in favor of some more yellow and black. So, when we're talking about doing Skywarp and Thundercracker, I am fully okay with them being a little bit different because the base figure was a little bit different than tradition. And Thundercracker pretty much confirmed this. We have a more emphasis on his gray coloring as well as the red across his face that sets him apart as, it looks like Thundercracker, but it's definitely going for a somewhat different vibe and dynamic. But then we get to Skywarp. And Skywarp was about 25, according to Hasbro specifically stated, about 25% remolded from Starscream and Thundercracker. Now you have to remember, back then, this was not a collector's industry just yet. There was nostalgia they could absolutely bank on, but it was just starting to become a thing. So they were still largely marketing to kids, and in their mind, if they had put out this mold a third time, it was going to tank, being too similar to the toys already released, unless they gave kids something a little bit new for it. So, new Minicon, new tail fins, new head. So he does kind of sit as this like awkward being out of the trio. And this was like the first time where I was just kind of like, why did you do this? Why did you do one weird when the other two were fine? Like, even back then, I would have been like, you know what? If they do Skywarp and they do him good, I'll probably go back and get Thundercracker as well so I can have the trio. And then they did this. And then Skywarp got weird. So, that was the earliest example, but oh boy, we're going to continue on. So when Classics came out, there was this emphasis on doing somewhat new and updated decos for these characters, which is how Starscream and Skywarp were done. However, because the mold was wildly popular, they reran it in very traditional Generation 1 colors, and on top of that, came up with some paint application improvements that the originals lacked. For instance, the side of the little vent in the chest became, folded out to be the landing gear, but the side of it was never painted on the original 2 releases, something they changed for the Universe 2.0 version. And that carried over to Generations Thundercracker, who arguably has the best and cleanest deco out of any of the original Seekers from this design. But that means that the original Skywarp is the only one who didn't get a secondary release. Even this is a secondary release of the Bakhan figure. Skywarp remains with his original modified deco from the original Classics release, having the more updated stripes and painting in vehicle mode, having some more interesting choices in deco for the robot mode, but more importantly, not having that silver painted to finish out the chest. So again, it's a more minor difference, but he does come up looking weird compared to the other two in both modes, just by a little bit, but still. I could even include the fact that he's still now the only one that has a rub sign stuck onto him, but at least that you can peel off. Now, it's not G1 style. It's, you know, there's a lot of G1 it's going to be in this list, but we can still dance around the fandom. We can dance around the universes for a little bit longer. Let's talk about animated. Now, again, this is one where I would expect them to be just a little bit different because Starscream is a little bit different. You know, having more of a gray hue in the cartoon and a little bit more of a blue hue as a toy. And this is entirely fine. When we get to Thundercracker, again, there are minor changes to exactly the way the toy was designed. Now, it is important to note that while this toy was featured and advertised, it never actually came out. So, technically, just by the fact that he was never released, Thundercracker is kind of more odd out than even Skywarp. Because Skywarp, again, is a little bit off. Rather than the show-accurate black, they decided to do this odd, like super dark, faded purple kind of color, which is a little bit odd. I will admit, compared to like the color change on Starscream, this feels a little bit more comparable, and Thundercracker getting axed from the line completely does mean it's a little unfair to compare. So instead, we're going to do the little ones. Because Starscream, as an activator, pretty much looks like a shrunken down version of his original figure. Thundercracker actually did come out as an activator. And again, he has slight changes from how the original was decorated. Now he's featuring a little bit of purple rather than his traditional red striping. So yeah, he actually did come out, and that makes for a nice little pair. And then we get to the Skywarp, which was only released by Takara as a contest exclusive. And why did you paint his head purple? What happened there? I would expect this of Hasbro. I would not expect Takara, of all places, to not only go with like a really weird change, but also to make it inaccurate to the cartoon. That's kind of weird. And that's kind of not how this should go. No, it's a bizarre one. Why? Like through all of these, I have not seen like, why did they paint his head purple? Like that's so far out there compared to some of these others. It's not the only time Takara made Skywarp just a little bit off, though. We're going to take a look at the Fall of Cybertron molds for Starscream now, starting with the original, of course. And this is actually pretty nice, you know, with everything being nice and metallic, lots of little details painted in. He's pretty good. He's pretty good. Again, we do have one that ended up being kind of a limited release kind of specialty figure. That would be Thundercracker in this case. But Thundercracker, again, looking very, very good. Bright silver, really nice look in both modes. It's identifiable as him, matches with the Starscream. Then we get to Skywarp, and where did his black go? Where did Skywarp's black go? I'm going to tell you, this is kind of a running theme with a lot of these, is that for some reason they decide that Skywarp is supposed to be primarily purple in color. I would argue no. If we're sticking to like even like traditional deco design, technically purple is the tertiary color, playing backup to both black and silver in his original design. So to make purple the primary is actually a pretty big shift. But we associate Skywarp with being like the purple seeker, so they get away with this. But again, it does make him feel just a little bit off compared to the others, as does the fact that he's using gunmetal gray instead of black as well. So even that feels a little bit off. This is not the only time Takara would do this, obviously. Here's another example, and we have to go a little bit more high-end for this. Here is Starscream from Alternity. Now, all of his traditional colors are present, but he really has been simplified down into his primary color of white. Or, you know, what should be off-white, technically. But that does carry over to Thundercracker as well. His blue is just the primary color, and that's pretty much the only color he's got going on. The rest of it is just silvers, grays, and blacks. Nothing to really break it up beyond that. And then we get to Skywarp, and once again, he's just the purple guy, rather than the one who's supposed to be in black. Again, it seems like a weird way of, like, shifting him over to, like, almost obfuscate what his actual primary color is. I can understand sometimes the deco is a little bit too dark. We're going to see another example of that further down the list. But it really is weird because, like, when you paint them all in purple, like, there are actually, like, toys that represent, like, all purple Seekers that are even before we started getting into things like, you know, like the Rainmakers and like the episode 1 like soldier Decepticons that you know, now have figures. Beyond even those, before even those, we had like generic Decepticon Seekers who were literally all purple. You know, the Heroes of Cybertron exclusives did that. But now it's the all purple is just an alternate take on Skywarp, which feels odd. You could convince me this is not Skywarp pretty easily. Let's go back into Hasbro and see more of their incidents of how this happened. So, here is Combiner War Starscream. The big version, like the big leader class version that was originally Jetfire. And again, this just kind of looks like an okay Starscream, kind of a take on his IDW design. Alright, cool. That's fine. And then we move into Thundercracker, and again, that's pretty much Thundercracker, you know? And character-wise, my favorite Thundercracker being shown off here. So that's all well and good. I'm perfectly okay with this. And then they did Skywarp. Why is his chest purple? This is so close to correct, but why did they make his chest purple? It feels like someone on the design team forgot that that chest is supposed to be the area around his cockpit canopy. It's supposed to be black. It's supposed to look like his canopy folded into his chest. Why is it purple now? It's weird, isn't it? Like, to get this close and then go, no. One detail wrong. Just the one detail wrong, just to bug you, just to get on your nerves. Oh, it's frustrating. It's kind of frustrating, really. Now, here's one we just talked about in a previous video. GDO Thundercracker. So this is based off of the Legion class Starscream toy that came out, and of course, the original version did not have his additional null rays as accessories. Instead, kibble from the jet mode turned into the shape of the null rays alongside of the arms. I think it's an incredibly cool way of incorporating them onto a small figure without having additional accessories. It's very clever. But for the GDO version of the for the GDO release and for all of the GDO Legion class toys, they all got accessory weapons for the first time. And that's great for Thundercracker, who this was his first and only release as this mold, by the way. When Starscream was released as kind of a lower tier market kind of release, you know, something that you'd go to like a Family Dollar in some cases, or like a Five Below today. This is the kind of Transformer you would find on there. Generic art, generic packaging design, and a very small or easy to afford figure. Well, they did Starscream as one of these. So, as to not waste the new parts of the mold, they included the null rays. So, yeah, 2 of them got to have their weapon accessories. And then Skywarp never saw a re-release to give him his. So he is the only one in that size, in that mold, that did not get his actual traditional null ray weapons. And that ain't the only time that's happened on a small-scale Skywarp. Oh, let's go into the current one. So, This Legion, no, so the core class Starscream, again, nice figure, comes with both of his null rays, correct? Okay, correct, we know this. And then we have Thundercracker, who again, just is a straight up repaint of Starscream. No real surprise there. This was a weird situation because Skywarp was the middle child released in between these two. But for some reason, Hasbro decided to try this weird weapon combination gimmick with the first wave of core figures. And that was, I assume, to try and inspire kids to buy an entire wave of core class toys in order to build the full weapon and get the play pattern. I don't think it really worked, because Iguana's still kind of shelf-warmed everywhere. And that does mean that Skywarp doesn't have his traditional null rays. I kept thinking they would eventually rerun this one again and give him a way of matching up. Nope, never did. At least to this date, they still have not. Which again makes him a little bit weird and a little bit odd compared to the other Seekers. This is not the only universe this happens in. Let's go to a couple more here. Let's swap universes a few more times here. Cyberverse Warrior Class Starscream, the Iron Butterfly design, which I quite like. This is a very simple figure, but kind of cool for what it does. And he's just looking straight up like Starscream from Cyberverse. And then we move into Thundercracker. And Thundercracker might look a little bit odd when you look at just this version, but this actually isn't too far from how he looked in the cartoon. So, I'm going to give it to him. What happened to Skywarp? I might be able to understand the translucency because teleporting, etc. But it still, as a toy, makes him look so odd compared to the others. On top of the fact that green does not play a part in his color scheme in the cartoon. In the cartoon, the character is primarily black in color. And that is not represented here. Female, by the way, too, just in case I messed up a pronoun here or there. I've been describing Skywarp as a he for about, 17 minutes now. But that combined with this weird red overspray across the wings just makes him look so odd compared to Starscream and Thundercracker. Again, it's so weird. It feels like different just for the sake of being different, because they absolutely did not try to make it accurate. Because every now and then they seem to have a problem just doing a jet black Skywarp. Case in point, here comes the Bumblebee movie mold. Alright, there's your traditional colors for Starscream, no big surprise there. Thundercracker, again, traditional in color scheme. He has the weird gas mask mouth from Blitzwing, but because Skywarp has the two, I'm not going to knock it. And then Skywarp comes up mostly gray, where again, black is now the tertiary color when it's supposed to be the primary. And again, purple in areas where it's not traditionally located. Now this one I will not give the toy any guff over because in the movie, that's how it looked. Maybe it's not Skywarp, maybe it's a different Seeker. Maybe, maybe. But it is being marketed as Skywarp, so officially that is what I have to go by. And then I have to ask the creators of the movie, why was Skywarp done differently? And the answer is probably because the scene is so dark, Skywarp and black wouldn't have shown up, so gray and purple it was. And my answer to that would be, then don't use Skywarp. Pick another Seeker. Put Acid Storm in there. Put someone in super bright colors. Put there were Coneheads in that scene. Dude, put Ramjet in there. He's bright white. Weird choice. Weird decision. And then we get to the finale here. So all the way to the top with the Masterpiece line. Skywarp comes out as the original version of the Masterpiece Starscream mold after the American release of said character. And this was fine. This just kind of sets us up for an inevitable Thundercracker to be released as well. Well, for a while, Thundercracker was actually the oddball out because he came from the second version of that mold that relocated that hip kibble down to the legs and made a whole bunch of other adjustments to just overall make it a nicer figure, so this was weird already. And then they made it weirder. Starscream came out from the exact same mold as a brand new release, this time doing away with all the battle damage deco, so now he actually matched Thundercracker a lot more. Skywarp never saw a second Masterpiece release in the US, which means, again, his is the oddball out in the situation. Why does it just keep happening to Skywarp? It's so weird to me. It's bizarre because, you know, like, this is like one of my favorite decos for a Transformer. And it feels like like half the time, they just go out of their way not to get him right. And it's frustrating. Now, these days, we have lots of options when it comes to matched Skywarp, matched Seekers in general. This is not too hard to come across anymore. But it is still weird that it is happening occasionally, and it's even happening to, you know, a figure that hasn't even come out yet. So it's odd. It's very odd, and it's kind of unfortunate. Just because I feel like the character needs to be done a little bit better than this, and it feels like every now and then they just don't really respect the character identity, you know? So, I don't know why it keeps happening to Skywarp, but I don't know. So there you go. Those are my observations for the day. Obviously, it's not a complete list, and obviously, yes, this has happened to Thundercracker once in a while, and sometimes it even happens to Starscream. But for the most part, I wish better for Skywarp. So, that's it for the day. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I will see you next time.